Gaorii, and I live in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada.
So tell us how you got involved with Ananda Marga and why.
Okay, well, I was 17 years old in 1973. And so, like, last year was my 50th anniversary, actually, of getting initiated. So ever since I was a little girl, like looking back on it now, I realized I had spiritual feelings. I didn't know that's what it was. Like, for example, I remember lying on like in the summer, lying on our front steps and looking straight up above the eaves of the house where there was one really bright star. And I used to stare at that star and try to measure the distance in my mind mentally between myself and that star. And years later, I remember thinking, oh, that's kind of like first lesson, right? So part of me thinks maybe I did meditate in a previous life. And so I was always a little bit of not a loner exactly as a kid, but, I would sit alone and stare at the mountains and try to imagine what was beyond those mountains. So the idea of infinity attracted me. And I also had, like a lot of kids in the 70s, I did experiment a little bit with drugs and I got into psychedelics just a little bit, but not so much that. But the people I met through that were talking about these spiritual topics that I'd never heard of, like, enlightenment and mystical powers and all this kind of thing. So it really intrigued me. And around the same time, the Beatles were going to Rishikesh and Maharishi and TM and all these kinds of things. And even though I was still just in high school, it really interested me. And one summer between grade 11 and 12, my parents, I don't know why they did this, but they let me go on a bus. It's an overnight trip to the big city, Vancouver. I lived in a small town. And I can remember thinking on the bus all night long, if only I knew how to meditate, I could, I wouldn't be wasting my time sitting here on the bus. And when I got to Vancouver, without getting into details, I ended up at the Gaoriiji, and they were hosting young people that were kind of traveling around. So when I knocked on the door, they were supposed to give me a bed for the night. This woman came to the door and said, "Oh, great, come in, but be quiet. So-and-so's meditating." And my mind lit up like, oh, meditating? Really? And I'm like, wow, where am I? I looked up and there's a sign, Ananda Marga Yoga Society, on the top of the door. So I went in, and that brother's name was Mahasarsti, and he was giving a meditation class that night. So I distinctly remember being upstairs in kind of this, it was hot summer, so it was like an attic room, and there's a big group of people, and he was teaching Bhavanam Kevalam, I guess, I don't really remember. And he was just explaining how to meditate, simply. But instead of meditating, my mind was going, I'm meditating, look, that was kind of my first experience. And then I ended up staying with them longer than I planned. And an acharya came through about a week or two later, and that was Dada Sarit Kumar, who's now, of course, Sarvabodhananda. And back then, there really weren't any deities, any female acharyas in the sector, or at least in the West Coast. So I got initiated, and that's how I came to Ananda Marga.
So, and how long before you had your first meeting with Baba? What happened there?
Okay, so that was 1973. Of course, Baba was in jail. Then he got out of jail at the end of or beginning of August in 78. So 79, there was the tour in Europe. So I remember, there's no internet back then. Long distance phone calls were prohibitively expensive. So we kind of relied on newsletters and maybe individual letters that people would mail you. So nobody knew that I could find exactly when and where Baba was going to be in Europe. So I had to buy my ticket. So I did, but unfortunately, by the time we figured it all out, I got to Europe just after DMC in Fieschi in Switzerland. Um, so that's always been a little bit of a sad regret in my mind that I missed that. But I got to, it was a very strange feeling. Like I was here in Vancouver, I took the train across Canada. It was 5 days. And then I flew to London. And again, I didn't know where Baba was, but I had this sensation of being pulled like a magnet when you hold the two parts of a magnet together and they go together. Um, this feeling of being pulled. So I landed in London. I had a phone number. I phoned the Gaoriiji. It wasn't a Margie because they were all in Europe. They were all in Switzerland. But he told me, oh, Baba's in Germany. So, and I'm like wandering around the airport, like, because you had to change airports, I guess, or terminals. And this complete stranger came up to me. Oh, do you need help? I'm like, yes, I need this other. Okay, follow me. So I went, got on the plane. I landed again. I made another phone call in Mainz to Mainz, which was there was a, don't know if it's still there, but there was a big office there, and I forget who answered. But yes, Bob is here, but he's in this little town whose name I forget. I'm sure other people remember better than me. Um, so I had one of those Eurail passes. So I hopped on the train. I got off in that city. And I don't know where to go. And I looked up and I see a Dee walking down the street. So I ran as fast as I could with my backpack and Dee, right? And she's like, oh, come with us. Baba's in this other town. So we hopped back on a train. Again, I had that pass. And we got to this little village and this beautiful white kind of cottage where this Margie couple lived. And they put me into a GV uniform, and out I was going to go on field walk with Baba with my GV uniform because that was the only way for sisters anyway, really, at least easily to be able to go on field walk. So I'm telling it in some description because it was that feeling of being pulled all the way to where I ended up getting field walk. Right, there was no break. Like I just was going, was being pulled, and there I was. So it was evening. I don't remember much about the field walk. I've heard a few stories here and in Dadavedi Pragyananda's book. I know that the car we were in broke down, or maybe it was the other car that broke down, but I remember a car breaking down. The sisters were in one car and the brothers in another, and we had to figure that out. I do remember walking along, and I was GV, so I was going to help Baba, and I had a flashlight. That was because I was behind him, and I was trying to hold the flashlight like on the sidewalk so he could see where he was going. It was really dark. And all I could see were like his two legs walking along really fast underneath the way his dhoti came down. And every so often he would stop and say things. I didn't always hear everything, but I think he was pointing maybe at a plant or something, and he said it could cure cancer. And then this sister who was on the field walk, now, again, we were told not to ask any questions, and people have mentioned that here in these interviews. But I guess she didn't get that memo because she says, oh, Baba, did you go to university, or how do you know so much? And he paused and he said, everyone's like kind of shocked that she said that, like, and then he pauses and he says, I don't know anything. I'm only the Baba. I just love everybody.
Very sweet.
Yeah. And everyone like, your heart melts. I got to go on another field walk, which I can't remember if it was in that town or somewhere else, but it wasn't a walk. It was on a boat. I don't know if anyone's told you that story. It was like one of those river crafts that you can go on for a tour of the river. And so somehow I got to go on that. So Baba, it was just Margie. So Baba was like more at the front, like at the bow of the ship, and we were sitting back. And of course, you're on the waves and couldn't hear anything. But just being on that, but like thinking back now, at the time, it's just like it was all happening so fast, and you're young, so you just sort of assume that these things just happen. But thinking about it now is like, how did I get to go on that boat with just a few people, right? So I do remember when we all got off, because we're like, what was Baba talking about? Like, we couldn't hear what he was saying. And he said something to the effect that when the chariot wheels are going, like the chariot's moving and the wheels are going around, the dogs will bark at the wheels. And he was saying that in connection to the Indian government, Indira Gandhi, and all the political unrest and the persecution of Ananda Marga and so on. I got PC. So one of the places I was on a bit of a tour in Germany, and Timmern was the LFT training center. I don't know if it's still there. It was an enormous building. It wasn't really a house. It was actually kind of a big, I don't know what it had been before, but kind of a lodge or something. So this big house. And I got my PC, which of course for sisters, which was always a big clash, was we weren't allowed to see Baba alone, which of course makes total sense, to protect everybody and everyone's reputation. So there'd be like small groups of 4 or something like that. Pretty sure my group was about 4 women, but you really don't care about the other people that are with you. It's just you and Baba. But I came up close, and you're not very far away, and you're sitting there. You do your pranam, and he didn't say much. He didn't say anything personal to anybody because it's a group thing. So basically, what's your name, where are you from, and what's your duty? And I remember like, I'm GV, Girls Volunteers, which is the female equivalent of ESS for those that don't know. And he looks at me and says, "Oh, you protect me." And I'm like, "Oh, yes, Baba." But I remember thinking, "No, you protect me." No, that's about all I remember thinking. Each person leaned forward a little bit, and he put his thumb on your trikuti there, and the fingers like your 7th chakra. And then he said some Sanskrit blessing, and forget your past, be an ideal girl, be an ideal human being, do something for humanity.
You, how did you feel when he was doing that and saying that?
I was so stunned being that close to, because it'd been years. I'd been at Margie since 73, 17 years old. Here I am, 23, thinking I'm all grown up, I guess. And he had just been an idea or a picture, right? Until then. And I was just kind of living in the moment. I wasn't really thinking anything, but it like I didn't have a big rush of bliss or anything like some people say, but just an unreality of it and kind of moment by moment awareness.
And when you came out of PC, how were you feeling then? Did you feel any different to when you went in?
Well, you know what I forgot to say before this was I've always struggled with feeling good enough, as a good enough Margie or good enough human. And there's always this drama around PC. The DDs are running around with lists, and at one point, and they're making a list and had these people, and they're saying, "Oh, you're not on the list." Like, and so I remember like crawling away to a corner, like just feeling completely rejected, and was trying to do sadhana. Okay, just have to. And then Didi comes running up to me. Where were you? Come on, you're. So it was all in my head that I wasn't on the list.
Mm.
So I think when I left, went in and I realized like he really does love me, like, and I'm not just like nobody. I deserve it too, like everyone else. So that's kind of the feeling I had, and just kind of floated away and went on. It's a very vague memory now because it's so long ago, but um, of course we're told, and it makes sense. You go and you try to do some sadhana right after, and I remember just trying to concentrate because I was so like happy about just having finished PC.
Mm. You were talking about earlier on when you're going to Europe, you're in the airport, not sort of sure where to go, and a man came up to you and asked you if you needed help. I just remember I've done a few interviews, and also I've experienced it where when you need, some person will turn up and offer you help. Obviously, it's
Yeah,
Baba working through that person, but
yeah,
it's amazing how many times
yeah,
that happens.
yeah. Oh yeah. Um, I've noticed that too with some of these stories, and of course at the time, again, it was just like kind of in a panic, right? Where to go, what to do, and like, oh, okay, if you're going to help me, right? But thinking back on it, you realize,
Mhm.
oh, that doesn't just normally happen.
Yeah,
Especially in big airports, like nobody helps you, you know.
yeah. Well, ask you if you need help. Yeah, I heard you'd had dharma samiksa. Tell us about it.
Yeah, yeah. So I think it was 1981, but again, that's just a vague memory. Um, we got this call, like, go to India. Bob was doing this thing. I don't even know if we knew the name of it. So that was my first trip to India. I had no money in those days. Somehow I put together the money, or borrowed it, got the visa, got to India. It was summer. It was really, really hot. I'd never experienced the heat like that. I'm from Canada. It's not that hot. And the beggars and the lepers, it was such a shock. And so we were hustled. It was also a time when Margies weren't exactly, welcomed. So there was all these Margie brothers and sisters. A lot of people went through Frankfurt. We had to pretend we didn't recognize each other or know, you can kind of tell who might be a Marg, and just ignored. And we landed, and again in a lineup, just so scared you're not going to be allowed in, but we all got in kind of incognito. And we went to a hotel, and the daughters were helping us. And then we went to Jodhpur Park headquarters. And of course, the sisters all had to get saris, could not wear Western clothes. And I just remember how, like, it was pretty clashy for women to have to wear, because you're used to very simple dress. Anyway, it's the same kind of thing as PC. It was the group of people. So we stood there, and Baba, it was like he was doing an X-ray of you. It wasn't a feeling like you're making eye contact with another like normal person and you're kind of connecting. He kind of was just staring at or through you. And then he'd look like that and tell I guess it was GS or PA, I don't know, which asanas to do. And I just got the basic asanas, which told me I'm basically a very healthy person. I didn't need any, because some people got special asanas. And then it was like, do you, let go of your past, and some of the same things he said in personal contact, but, do you, um, admit your mistakes. So I'm paraphrasing because I honestly don't remember. And then he had to hold my two hands out like that, and he took his stick and he was hitting my hands, and it kind of hurt. I know this thumb, like the little tip, it had a metal tip on that stick, and it kind of hit my hand, but it really didn't hurt very much. And I remember thinking, oh, I deserve much more than this. And it was just like a few here and a few here. And then same thing, he bent down and he did the same kind of blessing. And especially here, like, let go of your past. It's over. Like, whatever mistakes you made, go forward from now. And yeah, it was just an amazing experience. And then that was only 10 days in India. And then after that, a whole bunch of us went to northern France for the very first World Prout Convention. So that's all kind of part of that experience.
So, and what are you doing now?
Well, I retired from work a couple of years ago, and one of the things I've been trying to do is, it's quite isolating here. There's just a few Margis here, and we don't have DC that often and things like that. So, trying to make connections with folks online, and also kind of got into an ad hoc project to revive the old English bhajans that Margis in the West used to sing at Dharma Chakra and gatherings and retreats. And before Prabhat Samgit came along, and people kind of dropped singing the bhajans. So we've been meeting every month. There's a small group, about 6 or 7 of us. We've been meeting every month and practicing or just playing bhajans for each other and recording them and the lyrics, the guitar chords, and then making a little sound file of them. So we're kind of doing an archive. And, we've been at it for about 4 years now. So when we go to retreats, either online or in person, we've managed to do sort of little bhajan nights where we'll do a few bhajans, kind of with the Katha Kirtan party, where we'll do some kirtans, some bhajans, and people will tell Baba stories. So that's kind of been my focus.
Lovely. Okay, well, thank you very much for sharing that with us all. That was inspiring to hear.
You're welcome, and thank you for doing these interviews. They're very inspiring.
Okay, namaskar.
Namaskar.